Welcome to Paper Crafter's Library. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this I Love You Watts and Watts card. Now this card incorporates a variety of different techniques. I demonstrate how to use the MISTI, which is a stamp positioning tool. I demonstrate how to use a double stamping technique to clear emboss over a colored dye ink. I also demonstrate coloring with Copic markers, and then how to use a clear drying lacquer to give dimension to elements of your stamped image. So I have here a 4 by 5¼ inch piece of Simon Says Stamp 120-pound white cardstock, and I've got my MISTI, which is a stamp positioning tool. I've got my foam pad in there because I'm going to be working with my clear stamps, and then I like to keep a piece of grid paper in there so that I can see where I'm aligning my cardstock. So I'm going to take my cardstock and I'm going to place it in the bottom corner. Usually I like to work in the bottom corner. And then I'm going to take my magnets. Now the magnets come separately. The grid paper comes separately if you purchase a MISTI, and I do recommend that you actually do purchase them because they make it a lot easier. I'm going to start by stamping my image. Now the stamp set that I'm using is this Simon Says stamp set called What's Up, and I'm going to be using the outline light bulb. And I'm also going to be using the raise, but I want to make sure that I have it positioned so that I have enough room to put the raise at the top. So this is about how I'm going to do it. So now that I've determined the placement of where my raise are going to be, I'm going to remove those, leave my stamp in place, close the lid, and then you see the lid actually picks up the stamp. So now, because I'm planning on coloring in my light bulb with Copic markers, I'm going to be using my Memento Tuxedo Black ink from Sukaneko. So I've inked up my stamp, and then I am closing my lid to stamp. And then before I take my stamp off, I like to take a baby wipe and I like to just clean off the ink from my stamp, and as well as anything that got on my lid. Now the other thing that you can purchase with the MISTI, and I do recommend you do that as well, is a plastic cleaner, and that's specifically designed to clean this, to remove stuff and keep it from fogging up. So now that I have that stamped, I want to be able to stamp my raise. So I'm going to now position these above my light bulb, and then I'm going to close my lid, and I'm going to move my magnets downwards, whoops, like so. And I'm going to be stamping in my Simon Says Stamp Sunshine ink. So first off, I'm just going to make sure my stamp is clean. Saw a little fluff there. I'm going to press my ink pad all over my stamp. And then I'm going to close and stamp and lift. And the nice thing about this is if your impression is not perfect, you can always go ahead and stamp a second time. Now, I actually like that this looks just a tiny little bit mottled, and it does smooth out more as it dries. So I've gone ahead, I've dried my stamp now, or not dried it, I've cleaned it with a baby wipe. So you do have to make sure for this next step you get rid of all the ink, and if you have a scrap piece of paper, you can just kind of press it against there just to help dry your stamp. Then I'm going to take some Versamark ink, and this is a clear sticky watermark ink that is also perfect for embossing. So I'm inking up my stamp, and then the stamping, as you can see now, it's perfectly aligned directly on top of my original image. So now I'm going to set my magnets aside carefully. They're very strong, so you don't want them to stick together because they're kind of hard to separate when that happens. And I'm going to place this over a coffee filter and use some of my WOW clear embossing powder. This is a clear gloss regular. You can purchase it in big or small containers, depends on where you buy it, what they have available. And then I'm going to take my heat tool and I'm going to heat that until the embossing powder melts. So I'll be back once I've done that. There you can see what that looks like now that it's been embossed. So now what I want to do is I want to color in my bulb. So I'm starting with some Copic markers. I've got R22, R27, and R29. Now, just a couple things about when you're coloring with Copic markers. So I like to use my brush tip, as you can see here. I like to pick 3 colors, so a lighter tone, a medium tone, and a darker tone. And when you're working, you can work either from light to dark, or you can start dark to light. My preference has always been dark to light. I just find that I can control the shadows a lot better, and I seem to lay down less ink when I do that. So I always start and I use a flicking motion, and how high I angle my brush really depends on how thick of a flick I want. So for small areas, I tend to angle my brush higher, and I just kind of touch and flick. And you can do it from both directions. I'm more comfortable doing it from left to right, so what you'll usually see me do if I'm working on a bigger image is that I'll start on the left side, work towards the right, and then I'll actually rotate my cardstock upside down. So I'll lay down my first color by doing these small flicks. Then I'll take my second color and I'll overlap slightly and flick it out further. And then I'll take my lightest color and then I'll overlap that and bring it out further. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that some colors are going to blend better than others. So for my bulb, I'm actually going to be using yellows. Yellows blend very easily. When you get to deeper colors, reds in particular, they're a lot harder to blend. So usually you're going to have to follow this process several times before you get a nice smooth blend. And so you'll typically see me do that. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to color my heart, and I'll speed up the camera a little bit so you can see how I'm doing this. And then once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and color the light bulb in the same way, and then I will be back. So there you can see what my light bulb looks like. So just to recap, I used R22, R27, and R29 for the red. I actually meant to use R24. It just turns out that I had actually accidentally capped my marker wrong, so I thought I was grabbing R24 when in fact I grabbed R27, and I didn't realize it until after. Then for the yellow, I used my lightest color was Y11, my mid-tone was Y15, and my darkest was Y19. And then for the base of the light bulb, I used T1 as my lightest, T4 as my medium, and T6 as my darkest. Now, it doesn't necessarily matter that you use the exact same ones that I did, it's just you want to make sure you have a blending family of 3 different colors, a light, a medium, and a dark. So I've gone ahead and put my cardstock back in my MISTI. This time I've got it a little bit more centered. And I'm going to be using the sentiments I love you, Watts and Watts for this. I'm going to be actually making this card for my husband. So if you're wondering why I'm doing a love theme card right now when it's not Valentine's, I just want to show him or tell him how much I appreciate him. So that's why I'm doing this now. So as you can see, I positioned my sentiments, placed them on my lid. I'm inking them up with my Memento ink and stamping. So there you can see how that looks. So now I'm going to assemble my card. Now I ended up trimming down my panel. I cut 1/4 inch off of the bottom, so it's now 5 inches high, and then I cut 1/8 of an inch off of each of the sides so that it's 3 3/4 inches wide. And normally when I'm cutting, basically I look to see where there's the most space, and there was a lot of space in the bottom, which is why I cut the 1/4 inch off there. But because I had centered my image very well, I needed to cut an even amount off both the left and right sides. So I'm going to just use some double-sided adhesive now, and I'm going to center and stick this onto a piece of black cardstock, and this is Simon Says Stamp cardstock. And I cut my black cardstock to 5 1/8 by 3 7/8 because I wanted it to be just a really nice small border all around. So if you like a bigger black border, you can certainly cut it a little bit bigger. And then I have here a yellow cardstock. This is also Simon Says Stamp. I can't remember what the exact color name is, but I will list that in the supplies. And I'm going to center this on there, and that's a 4¼ by 5½ inch piece. So it's a card front size, and I'm going to stick that now onto a 4¼ by 5½ inch card. And the reason I do it that way is because typically your colored cardstock tends to be more expensive than your white cardstock. So I like to create my card bases out of white cardstock and then create panels of colored cardstock. The other advantage is it's also a lot easier if you want to stamp and write on the inside of the card, because you have your white card like so. So now, because I want to add some sparkle to my light bulb, I'm going to take my clear Wink of Stella pen, and I'm just going to use that to brush some glitter onto the yellow part of my light bulb. Now, I'm not going right now onto the red, because sometimes the tip of your pen, depending what ink color you're working over, it might pick it up. Now, not so much for alcohol inks, but it does do that for dye inks. So that's why typically I just got into the habit of working one color at a time. And now the camera may not pick this up. I'm going over it several times because I do want a decent amount of that kind of glitter on there. And then I'm also going to put some down here where the metal is, like so. So I don't know if you can kind of see the shimmer there. So now what I want to do is I want to put a clear drying glue in the center of my heart to give that kind of a glossy finish, almost like the embossed rays. Now, normally I would use glossy accents, but my bottle the tip of my bottle seems to have clogged up, and I have a big problem with that with these bottles. So recently, I noticed Stampin' Up! Came out with this fine tip glue pen that comes with kind of a needlepoint applicator, and then there's this piece which keeps it from clogging. So I'm going to be trying that out and seeing how that works. And I like that it has that really fine tip because you have a lot better control over laying your glue down. So I'm using that tip usually when I'm working and I didn't emboss the outline. I like to work by first laying down my perimeter of glue, and then it creates like a bead or a ledge, and then from there I can work inwards. And you don't have to press very firmly because the glue actually flows out really nicely. And then when you're done, you just take this cap and then it goes back into the tip of the bottle like so, and then that will keep it from clogging. So there you can see I have put some of that glue. This is called just a fine tip glue pen, but it's a clear drying glue in the center of my heart. And now I'm going to set that aside and let that dry, and my project is finished.